Alright, hello again to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos. Today I am back with the fire portion of the Eye of the Storm set review. So I'll be going over all of the fire cards, going from commons, uncommons, and rares. The preceding parts of the series will cover the remaining civilizations, multi-civs, super rares, and all that sort of stuff. But today the focus will be on fire. So I guess we can jump right into the review with Blade Spawn. So 2 mana, 2000 power Dracon, Void Spawn, and when it enters the battle zone, clash, and if you win the clash, this creature gets fast attack until the end of the turn. So I think this card is just slam dunk playable, easy addition for mono fire rush. I totally understand you're not going to win the clash too often, you're going to be an underdog to hit it, but I mean you're never 0%, like you're going to be maybe 20% or in that range, and then if you play Rush Mirror, even higher than that, maybe approaching 50. And I think this card is just very good. Like I think this is one of the cards that's super easy, like it'll go right into a metagame deck. So it's one of the clear cards in that sphere. Maybe in terms of just ranking, like which cards are most likely to see competitive play, this would be right at the top of this in the total set, maybe top 3, top 5 cards. But in terms of overall impact, or in terms of unique ability, like this is way lower, because I mean you're just upgrading a 2-drop slot to this card. So it's a pretty small increase. And if you're upgrading, and then on top of that, like it's not really doing anything incredibly unique. Like there might be much weaker cards that don't really see, that might see niche play here and there, but those other cards kind of create their own archetypes. Blade Spawn does none of that. It's just basically you just take your Dracon 2-drop, whatever crappy one you're playing, and you just upgrade it to this card, and you're playing a better 2-drop. So the reason I think this card is so good is just because I already thought like Bronca, like just 2-for-2 vanilla Dracon 2-drop, was already amongst the best 2-drops in fire. I thought it was the best stat line compared to Dracon Weaponsmith or Cliff Cutter. I just liked 2-for-2 more. I thought it was better to stuff against a lot of like the random cards people play in their decks. Like just 2000 power was nice. Like it makes your deck a lot less weak to random Manapod Beetles and pesky pineapples and cyber scamps that people are playing in their decks. Forces your opponent to actually trade with their Tire Gusher if they want to use that to do stuff. Like I just felt like 2000 power was just a better stat line in my mind, especially if you're playing Dracon 2-drops. Now if you're talking about just, if you're not playing a rush deck that's evolving into Dracon evolutions, then I felt Lava Leaper was the best 2-drop, just because it couldn't be attacked by any real early game creatures. It insulated you a little bit more from stuff like Artichoke and Arbiter, especially if you hit an early blast like that. Like it's still bad for you, but at least they can't attack over the 2-drop. So I felt like Lava Leaper was probably the best, but I just thought Bronco was the next best 2-drop. I mean, or sorry, the next best 2-drop, the most important one one of the more important ones to the actual archetype. I think the best actually is the 2 mana 1000, where if you control a fast attack, it gets fast attack. That card just was the best in my mind, just because I mean 2 mana 1000 power is what a lot of these early 2-drops are anyways, that it's competing with, but it was just so much better in the late game. Just having like a 2-drop you could pair with a Jet Thruster or a Wildfire Valkyrie to present double fast attack off 5 mana, or double fast attack off 4 mana, even if you're playing a Lava Racer, was just incredible for the deck. So that's the best 2-drop just because it has the best late game. But Blade Spawn's right there because this card has maybe not as consistent applications in the late game, because you have to win a clash, but it does have a lot more late game application than a lot of these other 2-drops, because it at least gives you that 20-30% to hit a fast attack in the late game, which I think is just great for the deck. So again, like 2 mana 2000 I already thought was at the top end of 2-drops and the best stat line, especially for Dracon ones. So just tack on an ability that's just strictly better, and you have a slam dunk card and slam dunk inclusion. But like I touched on earlier, you're not improving the deck by a ton. You're not really changing the matchup spread that much. You're not really changing too much overall. But I mean, in the games where you curve Blaze Belcher into this and you and you win the clash, like that's just great for you. So like you're just going to be in a commanding position at that point. Like a 2 mana fast attack would be completely busted. Like you just basically play like it's just absurd. So I definitely like this card for sure. Like I said, one of the top 5 cards in the set, likely, if you're talking straight up likelihood to be included in a competitive deck, but not the best card in terms of overall impact. So the next card here, another really interesting one, is Blazing Skyrider Valko. So 4 mana 3000. When it enters, if you control at least 2 other creatures, it gets fast attack. So this card, just analyzing it from the rush perspective, not really getting there. Like, the condition is just too much of a barrier. The extra 1000 power is not worth it over cards like Draglide, even if you're looking for a top end fast attack. So you're just not really seeing it. It's not going to see play. Like, Draglide will rarely see play in rush decks anyways, and this card is just worse for that. When you're playing fast attacks, a lot of the time they're there to close the game out and push through a win through your opponent's blockers or shields, and just try to present enough bodies, or just keep top decking fast attacks to break those last couple shields over the last 2 turns before they can completely turn the corner and kill you or land an Andromeda or something along those lines. A lot of the time they'll pretty quickly stabilize the battlefield, and at that point, like, a card like this is just a brick off the top, where something like Draglide isn't. So from the rush perspective, don't really see this card being viable. But the key thing here is its name is Valko. So it works with Ignis from Vortex, which is the 5 mana 3000 that can search your deck and summon out a Valko. So there was already a 3 mana 1000 Valko that gets buffed by 3000 power while you control an Ignis, but I think this card is just a great addition if you want to go that direction. I haven't experimented too much with that card already, but this card would make it a lot better and a lot easier to slot in. And I think one of the key things are reasons why is because there's just not much early game stuff that presents multiple bodies. There's late game stuff like Haven and Agrics that can do that. They go wide on the battle zone. There's things like even a little more mid game stuff. Like, I feel like once you get to 6 mana and above, that's more mid game. And things like Hive Queen and Rolkor can go wide on the battle zone. But when you're talking 5 mana and below, there's just not really cards that present multiple bodies. There aren't really token makers like there are in other games that can do that sort of thing. So Ignis presenting two bodies can be really sweet in terms of like enabling evolutions and going wide on the battle zone off of one threat especially. So I think enabling something like Arachnomech could be really powerful. And this card is really cool too, because like half the condition is fulfilled by the Ignis if you pull it out of your deck. So having Ignis is like an extra fast attacker, so you have a bunch of Valkos and you have a bunch of Ignis in your deck that can be fast attacks. That's pretty cool for putting on pressure. And when you're playing a more mid-rangey version, a mid-rangey fire deck, there isn't necessarily like the pressure on this Valko to be a fast attack every time, because when you're playing rush, like I mentioned, like your board state's already going to be diminishing and you're relying on just top decking fast attacks to push through for the win. So there's a lot of pressure on this Valko to be a fast attack every single time. But when you're playing mid-range, you can just play the bodies. You can take the game a little bit slower pace. It doesn't have to be a fast attack. Like, you're not as you're not looking to necessarily, your game plan doesn't hinge on this card having the fast attack tag every single time. So I think that approach makes this card a little more appealing. On top of that, with Arachnomech, this card makes Ignis even better, because not only is it a great bait, but it also turns into an amazing card to pull out of your mana zone with Arachnomech, because you can play Arachnomech. It brings out Ignis. Ignis itself has fast attack. Then Ignis can pull out the Valko from your deck, and now you have the Arachnomech attacking for double break, giant body, and then you also have Ignis and Valko that are both fast attackers alongside it. So you can just, it does a lot of work, because it basically just means you just drop the Arachnomech as a 6 mana 11,000 power fast attacker. That's basically what you do, because it completely replaces the bait. Because normally the problem is, like, even if your evolution plays a creature alongside of it somehow, that creature doesn't have fast attack, right? But in this case, like, it's like you didn't even evolve, because whatever 2 creatures you evolved into Arachnomech are replaced by 2 fast attacking, or two creatures that don't have summoning sickness either. So again, you're basically just playing a giant 6 mana 11,000 power fast attack, which is really cool. So I think that whole package has a lot of potential. Not sure how good it actually would be if it's going to be a competitive package. Those kinds of mid-rangey decks aren't the best in the face of things like Herald of Infernus and these kind of like top-tier competitive stuff. But I think Ignis has a ton of potential, and this Valko really makes that so, because I feel like as it just wasn't good enough. The old Valko just, like, you'd probably still play it for sure, just as a bait creature to pull out of your deck and have a 3-drop or something, but maybe you'd play like a copy or two, maybe the full 3, I don't know how it would break down exactly, but this card is just a really good upgrade to that package. So the next card here, Leaping Hissy, not really a fan of this one. So you reveal for a clash, card is level 10, and when it enters the battle zone, your opponent may choose and banish one of their creatures that has blocker. If they don't, it breaks one of your opponent's shields. So again, looking at this from the perspective of rush, the reason being, I mean, fire decks are predominantly rush, and there's not really a ton of other things. Like, this is clearly not really going to be a control card, and the mid-range fire decks aren't super prevalent. So as a rush tool, I think 5 mana is just too much. Not having the choice is also a really big downside, because you can't like just blow up the Strider that's holding back all your creatures, and your opponent has a choice if they want to protect that Strider or not. So I think it's just kind of a little bit of a bummer in that sense. And if you're playing the more mid-rangey version, again, the choice really hurts you, because if you're playing the more mid-rangey deck, like, you can't just play it and pick off a blocker to maybe diminish the impact of their follow-up Piercing Judgment. Like, maybe they're trying to aim to pair Judgment with a Strider, and then now all of a sudden, like, you don't have the opportunity to play around that, because your opponent can just take the hit on their shields, get an extra card, and then maybe compromise your position. And when you're playing a mid-range deck that doesn't necessarily have the sole goal like Rush does of just breaking every single one of your shields, or your opponent's shields, as quickly as possible, a lot of the time you might be trying to set up a kill over 2 turns, and just, again, if you just summon this card, your opponent just takes the hit on their shields, and they could just hit a blast that blows out your board state preemptively, and that can be unfortunate. So not really a fan of this card overall. Pyrotech Warrior is a 4-mana 4K, attacks, clash, and if you win, you banish an enemy creature with 2,000 or less power. Cool effect. I don't really think it's going to get there in any kind of competitive environment. Again, like, clash just puts a restriction on these kinds of cards. I don't know if this card would even be good if it wasn't clash. I mean, it would be probably fine. Probably not in like the open metagame, but maybe it would be cool. Like, when you're going first, you can start picking off bait. Like, it would be a nice card to have around in the standard format. But with clash, it's just not going to be playable in my mind. So Vicejaw Dragon is next. So 8 mana, 6k, double breaker. If your opponent has 3 or fewer shields, you tap 4 fewer mana cards to summon it. So this card is kind of interesting. So from like a rush perspective, again, I don't know if this card is actually better than just playing fast attacks, because like, you can put your opponent on low shields and then drop this, but it's like large, but is it really better than just playing something like Restless Conflagration? Again, it kind of harkens back to that whole thing where Bone Blades and Gloom Hollow can be bad cards for you, but Gloom Hollow especially, like, you're not worried about Gloom Hollow lining up badly for you when you're playing Conflagration in your deck, because if that's like the reason Gloom Hollow is so good against Mono Light is because it just blocks Sparkblade Protectors and Prism Blade Ascendant. It just blocks those cards so well, right? So when you're playing Restless Conflagration is the 4 mana Evo that double breaks, like, you're not, because it blows up a blocker, you're just not worried about Gloom Hollow in that sense. And then Bone Blades as well. I think Mono Fire I mean, Bone Blades is still a good card against Mono Fire, but at least the builds of Mono Fire I play, Bone Blades is a lot less of a concern, again, compared with something like Mono Light Rush, because like, you're playing Torhelms and a bunch of just cheap creatures and fast attacks and stuff like that. So usually you're trying to get value out of your creatures already before Bone Blades comes down by getting an attack in, getting a shield break in. So I don't know if Bone Blades is really a concern that I would want to warp my deck around answering, and this card is probably not worth playing the much slower card than just playing more Heal Flames and other fast attack options. Because yeah, it doesn't attack till turn 5. Hopefully, ideally, you're putting your opponent to fewer shields than 2. Like I guess ideally, like your opponent's on like 1 shield or so by the time this card can attack anyways, especially if you're just playing like a card like Heal Flame instead. Maybe that's ambitious, I don't know. Like it could be nice to untap when they have 2 shields with this, break the last 2, and then I don't know. I feel like this card pushes you a little bit too much into like having a battle zone basket, but I don't think this really gets there in terms of Fire Rush. I don't think it's like good enough, and again, like the inconsistency of like your opponent of this card not doing anything if you weren't able to break shields. Like if you're just sitting back, if both people are sitting back and they have a wall of blockers and you're just trying to build up a board presence and then maybe try to dig for your Comet Missiles and Ashen Tributes so that you can break through that board state, this card is just kind of a dead card sitting in your hand until you can actually translate to breaking their shields. So not really a fan. In a dragon deck, like maybe a more aggressive dragon deck, this card could be really cool because like you can break a shield with your Lux, break a shield with your Nyx or something, and then maybe this card is just like a super cheap dragon, and then it becomes even cheaper with those dragon effects, and you can play like a 2 mana like 6k blocker or 6k double breaker. Like that could be really cool. And then maybe you go a more aggressive route with like Kendricks even. Like maybe that's a cool direction you could go, but not sure on that one either. I mean, it pairs really well with Hyperspeed too. Like being able to go, like that's pretty strong. Like if you break, and then you have 2 birds out, you can go like Hyperspeed plus Rage Strike Dragon in the same turn at like 5 mana. Like that's pretty strong, but maybe there's a home for this, but it would require like a little bit of a different build of dragons. But it could be cool, could be worth exploring. Like maybe like some of the old versions, I know I recall a version that was played at some KMCs that was a little bit more like tempo based dragons, where it was a small dragon package, small bird package, but then it played, I mean, you'd like in this version that I'm talking about now, you'd want to increase the bird package for sure, but like it played a little more enforcer tools, like it played Metal Max and Blinder Beetle Primes, I believe, and it played a little bit more of like a traditional tempo deck with a dragon package built in. So I could see maybe dialing back a little bit from the tempo aspect and then going a little bit harder back in the direction of dragons, but being a more aggressive slanted dragons with more focus on hyperspeed and more focus on Rage Strike Dragon. Maybe that approach would be really cool in a post Herald of Infernus world, but yeah, I don't know if that really is viable with the card pool as it exists currently. So the next card we have Rocket Mine. This card seems totally playable too. Banish target enemy creature that has power 2,000 or less. If it's your turn, banish an enemy creature that has power 4,000 or less. So this is just another solid fire removal tool. I would throw it right up there with Laser Eyes and Waylay. No idea if this is better than Laser Eyes or Laser Eyes is better. That'd be tough to evaluate. You'd have to do a lot of playtesting to figure that out, and like really explore the metagame, figure out what's there. My guess would be maybe this card's better than Laser Eyes, but yeah, kind of tough to say. And then Waylay has the option of being a 2-mana card, which is really good on the draw, especially against like rush decks and dragon decks and stuff like that. So yeah, the problem is like all these fire removal tools don't really have a great home anyways. Like they're not really seen that often. Like they're all good cards and should be good cards, but they just don't really have the homes. Like Heat Seekers was a really powerful card back in Evo Fury format. When that card came out, that card was really strong as just like a super cheap answer to bait and creatures, and we really saw that play pattern explored and utilized. But as the card pool developed, maybe it's because of Cyberscam, maybe it's because of Keeper laws, but these fire cards, maybe it's just because Fire didn't have enough good cards overall. I don't know exactly, but these kind of removal tools just fell off in terms of their presence in the competitive sphere. Even cards like Tornado Flame fell off, but yeah, definitely not a bad card. Like Laser Eyes, totally good. Waylay, good card. This Rocket Mine is right with those, and it would be like another option to consider when you're constructing your removal packages, but those decks just don't really exist, which is kind of unfortunate. So next we have Shredmobile. When it's attacked, Gets plus 2,000 power until end of the turn as a 2-mana 1,000. This card is pretty intriguing. Like I talked about earlier, I already thought Lava Leaper was arguably the best, or one of the best 2-drops to play. Like, it's one of the 2-drops that I play in my mono fire deck, my Draconless mono fire deck, and Shredmobile might be a consideration too, like another upgrade. I feel like Lava Leaper is better than this card for sure. And then maybe I feel like the new Blade Spawn or whatever would be better than this card as well. I feel like that card might even be better than Lava Leaper, to be honest. Like, I think it's enough of an upgrade over Bronca that it's also like a better card than Lava Leaper. But I don't know if Shredmobile. So I don't know if Shredmobile, like, might be like the 3rd best card. And of course, you'd have to be a Draconless version of Monofire to even entertain this card in the first place. But yeah, it doesn't, like, it's good against things like Arbiter for sure, if that comes out of shields. Still good against Sumo Artichoke. They can still trade off with it, but that's nice too. Like, just having a 2-drop that doesn't die to Sumo Artichoke can be huge, because you just basically lose on the spot if you attack with your 2-drop, break an Artichoke, and then they get to kill your creature, and now you have Artichoke that you have to attack in and potentially trade off with a Wildfire Valkyrie. Like, that play pattern is super backbreaking, so having a 2-drop that's not weak to that makes it a little bit easier for you to stomach. So yeah, this card has potential, but would require some testing to see how the other 2-drops perform, to see if this card is really worth, because there's a lot of like minutia when you're trying to figure out what like the exact best 2-drop is, because they're all so close in playability. But it's definitely, I think it's probably a little bit too low down on the totem pole of playable 2-drops. So next we have Spiketail Buccaneer, powerful attack 2,000. Yeah, not really a card I'm gonna look at. 3-mana Dracon is not really something anyone's interested in. Taunting Flames, Shield Blast till the start of your next turn. Target creature gets powerful attack 3,000 and attacks if able. So I guess you could use this to force your opponent to attack you. I guess like a funny thing you could do is just like force your opponent to attack with their creature into your Herald of Infernus. But it's just so situational, because if your opponent just has a Piercing Judgment or like any kind of removal effect, they just remove the creature you're trying to set this up with. Because it's not like Magic where every creature is a blocker, and if you have a bunch of creatures, it's really tough for your opponent to make this kind of effect like completely negligible. But if all you're doing is sitting behind like an Aqua Strider and just hoping to like use this as a 2-mana removal spell for their 2-drop, and then you just bounce your Aqua Strider, like you just waste a card. On top of that, it's really hard to even answer with blockers in the first place, because it gives powerful attack. So like they're still probably going to break the shield, and then you hope to skirmish over with Aqua Strider on your turn. So it's just like not even that appealing, kind of difficult to set up. Like, the key thing would be trying to abuse it with battle effects like the Herald, like I mentioned. And again, like, that's just in the mid game like that, there's so many answers. Like, if they're going first, they could just drop a Lyra. If they're going first, they can just drop or if they're going anytime, they could just drop like a Homunculon or something, like, and then just tap the whatever you're trying to set up. Like maybe if you're trying to set up like a Jump Jets play, like that could be something relevant. But most of the time it's just better to just cast the Herald, force them to have an answer. If they do and they attack, then you can pair that Herald with Jump Jets. If they don't have an answer, you can pair the Herald with a tap effect on your turn. So this card just doesn't seem like, I don't know what the application exactly of this card would be. Yeah. So next up we have Torchwork Dragon. So an armor dragon, level 7, double breaker, can attack tapped creatures on the turn it enters the battle zone, and whenever this creature attacks, put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So it is mandatory as well. So 1 more mana than the original Tatsurian, and has a downside unless you can turn that downside into an upside. And I guess there's some cool application where you could do some funny plays with, I mean, the go-to is Hammer Dragon Falburn, which is, like, if anyone remembers, like, the old school Predict Dragons, where you would try to set up Falburn and then organize the top of your deck. So when Falburn attacks, you can flip the top card of your deck, and I think it's Armored Dragon specifically, but if you have the dragon on top of your deck, you can summon it for free. So, I mean, Torchwork Dragon, it builds itself there. You can untap with the Falburn in play. Somehow, hopefully, your opponent has a tap creature. Maybe because you use Taunting Flames. Anybody? You use use Torchwork Dragon, attack over their tap creature, and then maybe put Infernacy Immolator from your hand on top of your deck, then attack with Falburn. Flip that, like that kind of synergy could be cool, but mostly again just kind of a fun style thing to be doing. Maybe there's also plays with Boran where summon Boran, you can play Torchwake, trade off with something, or even chump attack this into a tap creature, and then put something else from the top of from your hand on top of your deck. And then maybe that's like a big creature that you want to hit off Boran, like, but you're going through a lot of hoops to ramp into something that's only a few mana more than the Torchwork Dragon itself. So you might as well at that point just maybe play a more defensive deck and then just try to survive until those turns, or maybe just go through from a different approach where you're not playing bad cards like this. But kind of a cool, fun effect to play around with at the very least. There's some shenanigans I guess you could pull off. So, next card here, Twisted Vicejaw, 4 mana 3000, ETB, Clash, and if you win the Clash, one of your creatures gets powerful attack 5000. So, mostly a limited card here. If you win the Battle Zone, you can attack over something. Pretty cool to have, like, these power boost effects aren't particularly good, especially on spells, but when they're on creatures, they can be nice when you're kind of exchanging attacks back and forth. You can use this as, like, the tap effect, or like the kind of homunculon bonus power effect. We all know how well that lines up, but part of the problem is like those bonus power effects are really conditional on the board state and your opponent having tap creatures, which is why homunculon's so good, is because you pair that power effect with the tap effect, and both those effects are situational, right? Homunculon's so good because tap is situational because you need a bigger creature than theirs. Power is situational because they need a tap creature, but you throw those abilities together and it becomes a really powerful card. So Twisted Vicejaw only having one half of that combination means it's just not really getting there. And again, typical Clash conversation, that's all analysis without incorporating how bad it is to have the word Clash attached onto your ability. So yeah, not really getting there as a competitive card. Unforge, interesting one here. 6 mana Shield Blast. Your opponent chooses one of their creatures that's an evolution and then has to banish it. So this card is very interesting. Like, it's 6 mana, which is a lot to cast from hand. Like, it could be a control tool, but like if you're talking mono fire, like you're not going to put this card in your deck. Like if you're going to put a removal in your deck, it's going to be something you can actually cast on curve, like Comet Missile. Maybe you want to play something like Laser Eyes. Maybe you would stretch to Tornado Flame at the top end, but that's probably like an old school tactic from like Evil Fury meta where you could afford to do that, or it was viable because like there weren't a lot of great options in the deck itself. I don't think Unforge is really getting there. Definitely not in mono fire. So when you're talking about not playing a mono fire deck, I don't like, what combination of colors are you really putting this in? Like if you're playing water fire, again, I think you're in the rush sphere where you're not really looking for this. If you're playing water light, you're much more of a tempo axis. You're just going to play, like, you have a lot of bounce. You're going to play piercings. You're going to play just arbiters or storm sparks or things like that. You're just not really going to be looking for this kind of effect. If you're firelight, I should say. If firelight, I don't know why I went down water light. If you're a firelight, you're going to be playing, again, a rush deck where you're not really looking for this card. If you're fire nature, maybe you're in the more mid-range sphere, but if you wanted this effect, you're probably just going to play Root Trap, which is a lot less situational of a Shield Blast, and like a way more effectual Shield Blast. And the difference between 6 and 7 mana is probably big, but probably not worth downgrading Root Trap. So this would be like Root Trap copies like 4 through 6 if you want that specifically to address Evos. But I just don't think, I just don't think this card is like playable enough, especially in the open format. There's enough non-evolution based decks that I don't think it really gets there. And like I'd rather, like, especially if you're just playing, if you're playing a more controlling mid-range deck that wants this card, or that would want an effect like this, like, hard to imagine you not playing Darkness, hard to imagine you not just playing Bone Blades and Terra Pit and calling it a day. Like, even light decks, like if you're playing a more slower pace, like light deck with fire, like maybe you're playing 5 Civ Pile, or maybe you're playing like a Naya Haven deck. Again, you just have Root Traps, and Root Trap is like barely played in those decks anyways. You could also, like, I just don't really see the home for this card. Maybe in Standard it would be a little bit better, but just because like so many decks are Evo focused, but that format still has Terra Pit and Root Trap. But maybe this picks up the slack against like lower cost Evos that is created by the absence of Bone Blades and even Return to the Soil. But yeah, I don't really see the home for this card, or even the appeal. Like, it's just a little way too like, it's a little bit too slow at 6 mana in my mind. Like, if you're going second, like, I guess it can come down to answer a Hive Queen or Rollcore, but like part of the problem too is like you just don't want to be answering evolution creatures. Like, it's just kind of counterproductive to be answering evolution creatures with spells from hand, just because they get all their effects right away. They already have the impact, and they're going to bury you if you're just trying to answer what scraps are left behind after each attack from those evolutions. So yeah, I feel like there's like better ways to like either proactively address those issues, or just find better cards that are way better across any of the matchups where this card isn't good. So yeah, not really a fan of it, unfortunately. Maybe I'm missing something, but yeah, I don't see the home or the desire even for this card. So next we have the final fire card here, Watchbot Brawler. Just 5 mana, 5k protector. Not much to say here, just basically vanilla. Not really a relevant creature type, so yeah. For fire, I think the most exciting cards, we have Blade Spawn for sure. I like that card a lot, but I guess not really the most exciting, because it's like an upgrade to like just the 2-drop slot, and it's like got Clash, so it's not really coming up that often. But when it does come up, it's going to be an amazing card. Blazing Skyrider Valko. This card is really intriguing for me as like something to explore with like Ignis builds. Like, I really like that potential, so that's like one of them. Hissy, not a fan of. Pyrotech Warrior, not really great. Vicejaw Dragon, maybe the third card of fire that I'm like really interested in terms of like trying to explore, especially like the dragon. Like that kind of dragon build would be something I'd really like to explore, more focused on hyperspeed, maybe in a heraldless world, just exploring this card with a bunch of birds, hyperspeeds, and maybe like you embrace a little more of like the traditional like aggressive maybe tempo side of things, where you're playing like 2-drops like Metal Max as well to break those extra shields to turn this card on. Maybe you play Keeper of Laws, play that kind of Keeper of Laws, maybe Finbar game, but then you have Rage Strike Dragon and Hyperspeed is like a really powerful dragon package to play really cheap, big bodies, fast attacks off of your birds. So that could be a cool card. I think those 3 would be the cards I most want to experiment with. Rocket Mine's like a totally fine removal spell. Shredmobile, a 2-drop worth considering, and Torchwork Dragon, kind of a combo card, but yeah, not too much. But beyond that, Unforge, not really excited about personally. I think, yeah, the most exciting cards for me are the Blade Spawn, Valko, and the Rage Strike Dragon. Rage Strike Dragon probably doesn't get there. Like, if we're just talking best cards, I would probably replace Rage Strike Dragon with the Rocket Mine, but this card's a lot more intriguing to me. So yeah, that is the fire review. If anyone has any extra insight on these cards, maybe wants to contend against some of these ideas, let me know that as always. But other than that, thank you for watching the video, and stay tuned for the continuation with the Mono Nature review coming soon. So thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.